Hey, Dr. Page, we're now on session 14 of the Surviving Sickness and Suffering series. Thanks for hanging in there in this video Bible journal. We've got some good questions for you today. Today we're going to be discussing more of the topic of, what are we discussing today? I completely forgot. I'm like that old surgeon that said, I've never made a mistake, but I've got a real short memory. No, today we're going to be discussing how to begin to look outward and look towards other people. So often we're focusing inward, thinking about our problems and our issues. But when we begin to look upward, then we can really focus inward in a good way, in a healthy way. And then the natural response to that is begin to look outward and find other people that we can serve. And so that's what this is about. I think you're going to enjoy this session today. So we're going to jump right in. This is Dr. Page, the best guy to see on the worst day of your life. There's an observation that I've noticed over the past 20 years, and it's this. People who seem to do the best in an illness or a health challenge are those who have learned to look outward instead of inward. Those people who move their focus from thinking about themselves onto other people seem to have better outcomes, seem to have more joy, more peace, more resilience and endurance compared to other people. And I believe this is because as we give of ourselves, God begins to pour more grace into us. As we give, we live. And it's often in those times when we think that we have nothing to give. It's when God begins to give us a kind of a supernatural measure of grace in our lives. Think of the widow woman there in the time of Elijah. He was sent to this lady of this town of Zarephath, and this widow woman who had nothing, who was going out to die, had only a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil, and Elijah asked her to give to him first, and he gave her a promise. As she obeyed and gave to Elijah, it's amazing, God fed both of those starving people, and her son provided for her needs. Think about the churches in Macedonia. You can read that in 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9, and how they gave out of their poverty. Now this wasn't their time or their touch or their talents. It was their treasure that they were giving. But the same principle applies. As those Christians gave of what little they had, God began to multiply that in the lives of other people, and He provided all of their needs. And it's interesting what it says there in verse 8. It says, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." It's like God wants us to give, and He give of our time, our talents, our treasure, and our touch to other people. God begins to measure out more grace to us. It seems like just the opposite happens when we have that inward perspective, when we're always thinking about us and our problems and what we're going through. I don't know, but I find this in my life. When I focus on all my problems and begin to throw my own pity party, I begin to get depressed, discouraged, disillusioned, you name it. So when we have this attitude of giving, we're actually modeling what Christ did for us. Think about what it says in Philippians 2. It says, verse 4, it says, "Rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others." And then it gives the example of how Christ sacrificially gave for us. And that's how we're commanded to live, irregardless of the circumstances that we are facing. In spite of our health challenges, that is a time in particular we need to give ourselves. Let's stop at this point in the journal, and the first question is this. Can you reflect on any times you seemed exhausted of your time, your talents, your treasure, your touch, and you gave all that you could give, and then you gave anyway of something, and then you saw God supply your needs? Stop and journal that moment in your life where that happened. The question focuses on 2 Corinthians 9:8, this promise that we have First of all, what does this promise mean to you personally? Second of all, are you meeting the conditions of this promise? What does it mean that God has promised to bless you abundantly in all things? And what comfort can you attain from knowing that God will provide for all your needs, physical, emotional, financial, relational, as you begin to test Him in this area? And finally, what is the purpose for every good work that you need to begin to step into? And the third set of questions involves this: what's holding you back from giving of yourself? And just give yourself an honest assessment. And then a similar type question, I want you to rate your focus from 0 to 10, and the 0 being an inward, introspective focus, and 10 being an outward focus. And just kind of describe where you are at this moment. I want you to go back and read Philippians chapter 2, verses 4 through about 8 to 10, and reflect on Christ's example of how He looked onto the needs of others. I want you to thank God for that, for His unconditional affection. Then I want you to focus on that part of the passage that says, "And for the joy set before Him, He endured the cross." I want you to write down what that kind of joy would look like in your life if you were to do the same and follow in God's footsteps. And finally, the last question focuses on Philippians 2:4, the interest of others. I want you to list some 3 other people, and I want you to list some interests that you could realistically be focused on. I had a friend, his name is Bob. He's a physical therapist, and I met him in a hospital in the Saharan desert. And Bob was there helping these Africans mobilize. I mean, so many of these small kids, it's so sad. They have burns and these horrific contractures and, surgeries, and they can't get up out of bed. And Bob is there ministering to them. And one night we were sitting over supper, and Bob told me his story. His son committed suicide. And you can imagine all the guilt and things that went through his mind, and how it almost destroyed his life. And yet Bob decided to serve there in Niger, and as he did and started making short-term trips over there and served those people, he began to realize just how minimal his problems were compared to them. And he said it was almost like the scales came off of his eyes as he began to serve these people. He began to be healed on the inside and out. But it only happened as he moved from looking inward to looking upward, and then beginning to look outward and to find who he could serve. Here's the question we need to ask: how can you give to other people in your health crisis, in your illness? And it doesn't have to be anything out of the ordinary. It can just be in your everyday life. Suffering amplifies your influence of other people. It's almost like playing an instrument and then being able to hook it up to an amplifier. Well, that's what suffering does. Suffering is that amplifier when people begin to focus and notice. You can say things to people 100 times when you're not going through adversity. And then all of a sudden you go through adversity and it seems like things begin to stick and things begin to change and people begin to transform when they listen to you. You have a platform in your suffering, and why not use it as an opportunity to draw people closer to God? A patient suffering with ovarian cancer for 16 years and had to do a surgery on her, and I was so concerned that she wouldn't survive. And 2 things that she says, number 1, Doc, I've learned to play the cards that God gives me. And this lady had been given a lot of bad hands. But the second thing she said is, she said, if my suffering draws one person to God, it's worth it. And I thought, wow, man, that's hitting the nail on the head. In your adversity, you have an opportunity. It may be something as simple to restore a fractured relationship or maybe a strayed relationship. It may be an opportunity to share Christ with someone. Whatever it is, though, I want to encourage you to take that step. As you do, a miracle will happen. God will begin to measure out more grace to you, and He will give you more opportunities to share, and will begin to experience more peace and more joy and more fulfillment, maybe even at times that you were healthy. This is not an exhaustive list, but here are some ideas of how you can serve other people. Number one, you can pray. And you can pray for your loved ones around you. You can pray for your friends. If you don't have anyone to pray for, you can look at our prayer wall on our website, and that will give you some people to pray for as well. So you can see that link. You can just encourage people. You can write them a note. You can just, encourage them about certain characteristics and things that you see with them. Also, you're going to be meeting new people, new doctors, nurses, people in the hospital, x-ray techs. Be a source of encouragement for them. You may be surprised how much they need to be encouraged in this crazy healthcare environment that we live in. And I can't tell you how many times I am encouraged by those people who I see modeling this generous attitude and this gracious attitude. And then even more than doing, it's just being. If you would just be a person who is joyful, encouraging, peaceful, and thankful, I think that will go so long. So as you go through your day, we know that it's limited because of your sickness, but you still have opportunities. And I would just encourage you to be aware of those opportunities and take advantage of them. It may be the person sitting by you in the doctor's office, or maybe the home health nurse that comes to your bedside. It could be your doctor or a family member. But here's one final encouragement I want to give you. I want you to tell your story. You have a special story, a special, unique set of circumstances, and you have the ability to influence and touch people that others may never have the opportunity to, just because of your uniqueness. We're stopping here because I promised not to go over 10 minutes on these videos, but we're going to have one extra video for you with more journaling questions and more encouragement. This is Dr. Page.